The following audio is via a Skype call.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hello, Sue Minahan here, Sue Rose Minahan, and I really am appreciating this opportunity because manifesting really relates exactly to Aries, and that is our first archetype. So what is an archetype? Well, looking at life, what is the intention? What is the seed? What is the timing of action? Our whole backbone of manifestation. Because ultimately we reflect the cosmos. Astrology as a factor is our relationship with the cosmos, viewing from our position out. It's that relationship. And these seeds that we grow, the purpose, our entire inner intention gives us that meaning that we manifest. And this path exactly of manifesting this wonderful opportunity to speak with many of you and with this wonderful guest that I have today, Liz Muschett, who is an astrologer, a tarot, a Reiki master, and a coach giving classes. You can certainly check it out on our Talk Cosmos webpage site that's newly initiated. And the fact is that the manifestation has been a real quest, a real experience of Aries. You can read it on paper, just like you can look at the horoscope, and it makes some kind of sense somewhere in the framework of your mind, but it isn't until you experience. It isn't until you decide, I'm heading out, and you're alone, you separate, you're away from that massive crowd, and knowing that, yes, you need to do it in order to keep your strength, but on the other hand, going, everything is the unknown. The difference is in the past that you left, this is getting somewhat into astrology, which, yes, we're centered on, but yet this is conceptual thinking. So for those of you that are listening in for that aspect, we are going to touch on astrology. And that fact is that from the 12th house that you're leaving, because Aries is the first house, it's the start of everything, such as the time period we're in, the cycle we're in, as Earth, again, that reference to Earth, as it's cycling around the sun. We have 2 weeks left, and that's what we're holding our agenda to, is a focus of Aries. So in this first wonderful hour, before I speak with Liz, I'm covering to some extent an idea of what Aries is. So back to my experience, it really did open up huge vistas, the courage it takes, the fears it takes, standing there alone, as I was saying. Yet, what's our choice? As my great teacher, Maurice Fernandez, offers in his insightful ways of intention, that it is that the factor that we're alone, essentially. I'm not sure if he would put it that way, but that's how I'm putting it. And that we need to strengthen ourselves, or otherwise our little quest to live is not happening. Jumping out of that thought, remembering that astrology observes the cosmos in cycles. The planets have their orbits, and there is a symbolic reference. And astrology looks at the cosmos in these areas, these developmental areas. So Aries begins it. With that, I think I'm going to welcome Liz. She's a wonderful astrologer and has much to say. However, sorry, Liz, I've got a thought here, and I'm just going to share it because mythology, what is our intention? If we look back into time and the archetypes, this relates exactly to the archetypes. Carl Jung, great psychologist, coined the word archetypes. And it's because throughout time, our collective experiences showed patterns of development. Thinking again back to Aries, my whole experience of this top cosmos, organizing and implementing it, the thought was there. The thought has been there probably for years in various dimensions. And of course, it is those situations that happen in life out of yearning and trying and struggling forward to reach it. So therefore, looking at mythology, it too had that same course. It's very ancient. The language is so different. The language of everything is so different. We tend to think it's easy, just simple little instructions, but that isn't the case. Language really incorporates a tool to give us the conceptual thought. So, just as my quest of the top cosmos show took a long path getting here, with its courage and its disappointments from actions not going in the direction I thought and realigning with it, the mythology too must have been in people's brains and hearts, because it is that experience and it is that way that they tried to inform others, the community of people, what life was about, because everything has a poetry to it. What might make great sense to one needs to be expressed in another manner. Meaning that with Aries, there is some mythology, and we'll touch on that too. To reintroduce my wonderful guest, I'm going to touch on that mythology briefly. Because Mars, the archetype includes the sign, the first sign in this case of Aries, the house location, which is the first house, and the planet that it gives influence, like Carolyn Casey wonderfully says, is the influential planet of Mars. And Mars is on close right to the Earth, and is the god of warrior, the warrior god, and also relates strongly to Rome and the twins that started Rome. These two twins that were cared for by a wolf. There's so many layers we can look into, but my point that I'm making is that there's always a relationship in mythology between the cosmos spiritual side and our physical matter here, which relates entirely to this show, because it is that interdimension, crossing the borders, trying to how we manifest what is inside with the physicality, and then looking at the physicality and going, oh, okay, or yay. I mean, there's, we all have these experiences. And so mythology, in various ways, if you essentially think of it in those terms, begins to make some more sense, because it's like, what were they really saying? And here, this is segues with Liz. Liz and I have an open conversation, but there's one idea that we have. And that is that the gods had said that these two children, these twins, were not immortal, that they would die of elemental circumstances, the elements, which is the earth, fire, wind, air in astrology, very important, but also the physical matters that we experience through the time that we're living here. Well, hello, Liz. I'm so glad to join you, or you join me together.
Well, thank you, Sue Rose. It's a pleasure to be here and join you blazing your new trail.
Absolutely. It's fun to have another soul on this path. Aries, have you thoughts immediately that come to mind of courage and despair and on your quest, or what excites you at this moment?
Well, it's the energy and the passion to move forward with what you want to accomplish is kind of how I'm looking at it these days.
I love it. It does keep us going. This is so true. It's like, oh my. Uh, just when one's sinking, thinking, this can't be, you think it buoys up and, success. Nothing like success.
Right, and
So,
getting us moving in a forward direction.
yes, which is uncharted. Absolutely. An uncharted path.
Well, and Aries and Mars is about experiencing new things that perhaps we haven't experienced before.
So what makes that courage? Why is it? What makes us want to even think about jumping off a ledge, which it feels like sometimes? I have Aries in North Node. It's like I'm gone and wondering what happened.
Well, that's good because Aries, lots of times they jump before they think. So,
Yeah, because otherwise, if you think, you'll never get off the high dive. It's
correct,
way too
correct.
far.
And then touching on the point of the elements in astrology, we have earth, air, fire, and water. So, depending on where Mars or your Aries energy is, in what house, it can come across a little bit different, perhaps. But in its purest form, it's fire.
Yes, and let's dwell on this because certainly, as far as the audience is concerned, and we have a huge range of people, everyone from the curious to the really knowledgeable, but the idea is that we're coagulating our thought patterns to spur off other ideas. And because it is the elements, as you had indicated before in our little chats, which I really appreciated remembering, how we access these motives differs. Oh, which I was going to say also, if people need coaching or counseling, certainly they can look at our webpage site, Talk Cosmos, and find Liz. Her website, by the way, is her name, Liz Muschett. And again, just check out Talk Cosmos. Okay, so in other words, we have, depending on the elements, a different motive, right?
Yes, it operates a little different. The fire is kind of, they don't think about things and they just try it. So they're not afraid to try all kinds of things. It's like today it might be I'm an artist and tomorrow I could be a musician, and that's really cool that they try different things. Where if it's in earth, it's like they are a little slower to move forward, but they would still try things, but they don't just this moment change their mind and do it. They have to think about it a little bit and probably do a little investigation. And then the air sign probably is going to have to process it in their mental capacity for a while. And then water is, how do I feel about it? So,
Yes, we're really working with those elements again, getting down to the experience, which I think Aries really is. Aries, well, perhaps I'm speaking water too, is experience. I mean, they're all experience, but yet you can look at things more objectively in an air manner of mentality. But for fire, that it's just like watching it move. It just travels. It hasn't a mind. It just has an energy. It's pure energy, action.
right. And like in a fireplace, it's a contained fire, but then a forest fire is usually out of control because it's created a forest fire. So even fire works in different ways.
Yes, and depending on where you're at, the fire might be great or not. Because if it's in the fire itself, who knows how it thinks? It might be, oh boy, I'm on a heyday. Fire! But, in a contained one is very much like life. It has a certain amount of energy. is doing its job for a certain purpose, heating. Of course, fire, actually, in a fireplace only has a certain radius. I lived in a house once that required a fireplace, and I froze if I was 6 feet away and not stoked all the time. It was quite a long cold spell. So, and what I'm getting back to just is the fact that of thwarted energy. I think that's part of the fire element, is that it wants to go in a certain direction, and it's when that direction doesn't work, maybe lack of energy, right? There's no wood to burn, or there's water. What are you going to do with water? Make some steam.
Right. It can put the fire out, perhaps, even. Like right now, Mars is in an Earth sign at the moment, so it's a little bit more grounded, perhaps, than maybe discharging forward.
Yes, that's so interesting. And particularly, now this is astrology speaking, which I'm always glad to touch on. Its ruler, because you can say ruler or influential planets, because they have relationships. That's the factor. It's cycles and relationships. It can be as complex or simple, and it can be interpreted just like if you're going to a doctor. What does that mean? But and so therefore, Saturn is sitting right next to, as friends, or I don't know if they're friends, but they're having to talk to each other. That's for sure. But what is the structure? What land are we on? Are we grounded?
Yes, Saturn's been wanting to constrict or perhaps put the fire in a container a little bit. So now that Mars is moving away from Saturn, it's wanting to kind of spread its wings and move forward again a little more quickly.
It is interesting. Again, going back to this, my own experience here with Talk Cosmos, of harnessing that energy and putting it into format and learning how to work with it and learning all the technological things that web pages, although I have a wonderful web page person, John Foster, who has carried me through, and a team. But
Yes, your webpage is looking great.
it is. It's quite. People will like it. You'll like it. It has information. It'll grow. If you join, we'll have a newsletter. And people, if they want to talk and be a guest, can certainly contact. Well, let's see. As far as fire goes, what about another element of water? How does water operate?
Well, water can be flowing gently. It can be out of control and flooding. It can be frozen. Steam is even a form of water too. So there's lots of different forms of water.
With air. I mean, not, yeah, with air, but also with fire. That's right. Well, meaning in life, if we look at this symbolically, there are methods of our madness, you could say. And certainly there's frustrations involved. People speak of anger with Aries, but then we all have our emotions, and anger has an energy, and anger can create a cause. If we look at when, well, we won't get into more astrology, but the fact is that we have gone through some times that have had that strong influence, and I think many people, I will say, that I'm in contact with seem to be activating their lives. And that's really a huge Aryan factor that as you were mentioning too.
Well, and sometimes anger can move us in the right direction if we don't get stuck in the anger.
Good point. Going through it, yes. It can feel sometimes like, where's the path? Because it is new. It is new. So, which also reminds me of something I've read and we discussed doing, going through the yoga of anger or this energy, which the yoga could be anything, but whether one runs around the block or breathes in deep and out deep, which is always useful, or running track. so many physical things to get that energy in motion, because it's an instinctive sign. It is the energy like fire, because it is a fire sign. Although, as you had pointed out, the subtlety, which is so important, that right now that fire is trying to be in a container. I like that, well put. It's well put. But it does, yes, if you can carry on from there.
Well, and Mars gives us the energy to go after what we desire or what we want in our life. So that Mars and Aries energy gives us a spark and fire and passion to go after it. Like your radio show, it's like it was a dream, and then you finally got down to it and pursued it, and now it's a reality.
Amazingly, it was always such a fascination. I thought, wasn't that a brilliant idea in life? So many things in life seems like that would be amazing. And I've known people that have had shows, and somehow when I heard on 1150, it's an AM radio station here in Seattle, and their site is 1150 KKNW. The NW must stand for Northwest, and it's online streaming. So for Seattleites, it's great. Just turn on the radio. But for all these folks over yonder, wherever you might be, we can stream it. But I was listening there in the car, waiting for someone to arrive home that I was meeting, and the broadcast was going on and on about this great opportunity. And it dawned on me, oh my gosh, what a venue. So yes, the method of the unknown comes to us in most surprising ways. And again, that could be because of the planet Uranus, which again is Greek maybe to some, but it is just leaving this sign of initiation of Aries.
Yes. And Mars moves through the signs. It was in Sagittarius a few weeks back, and now it's moved into Capricorn. So it's kind of, we get to take a little bit of a break in an earth sign, because Sagittarius was a fire sign. So, the push and the desire to accomplish what we want. And so maybe that was the push to get you to start your radio show.
Very likely one of them, which is so expansive. Immediately you jump to all these great ideas that in the realm of dreaming. And interestingly, that is exactly the necessary part. I happen to have been taking a class also with Dougal Fraser, a wonderful person located in the Los Angeles area, although he's come up to Seattle at a venue, East West Books. I know this is local talk, but we are local, and of course, for those who might visit, they may want to visit these spots. But the point is that Dougal sees color and teaches how to use color and manifestation. He's an empath. And getting back to the track here, we don't want to get lost here. Manifestation. What did you just say, Liz? I'm sorry, this is so typical me, and I didn't want to do this. What did you just say about?
Well, how Mars a few weeks back had been in Sagittarius, and maybe
that's right.
With
Thank
the
you.
fire, it helped motivate you.
No, I got it. Thank you so much. The whole idea, I keep wanting to say factor, but I'm going to drop that. The whole idea of manifestation starts with this great expansive dream, allowing it to live. As Dougal says, go with that. And in fact, he uses a color, he uses gold energy. Without going further into that, so I had been, as a comment, yes, I'd been in that process. I'd been wanting to manifest for astrology and get through a course that I was taking and how to use it. And it's been a long quest. But it does relate, all of this relates to the fact that we are energy. Cosmos is energy. Astrology looks at things energetically. It is symbolic. The mythology is symbolic. Things represent each other. And so it is this language, and that's how for the audience, that's how we're recognizing it. So if I talk about color, I'm just introducing another tool that you might use, because these ideas and metaphysical things bridge from one to the other, and in subsequent weeks of talking about archetypes will branch out.
Well, speaking of color, I would put red with Mars, and you could even add orange and yellow perhaps, but would you add any other color? Because you brought up color.
Oh, that's very good. Red is certainly emotion, and fire has the fire signs. Well, it's not just emotional like the water, but it is the passion. And so, yes, it has great feeling and emotion. In that whole process, all color has a place, just like all the signs have a place. And so I want to bring that focus that I'm not isolating one over the other. It's just how to use these. And in this whole process of looking at the archetypes and dwelling, for instance, on this start of Aries, is recognizing that phrase. Like in music, if you're playing music, which I've played violin, played flute, love music, you can play a passage and all of a sudden just get stopped. It's like you cannot get from that bar to the next. And until a person breaks it down and counts it out, 1 and 2 and, or 1 eana, 2 eana, etc., or even more, those are beats and eighth notes and sixteenths, and just stay on that moment. The same as the quantum physics, which some astrologers are so wonderfully advocating. Rick Levine is one, Dave Cochran's another, Gemini Brett, that the wave and the particle, light. So by peering at it, you see the substance. By standing back, you see the motion. So anyway, so that's the same with color. It's the same with all these aspects. So using color, getting back to your question, well, I would start with gold, and because it manifests. And then I would start with pink, which is a variation of red because it's self-love. And that's directly out of Dougal Fraser. And of course, you could go on to green, to growth, and onward forward. I think we're just about time to open up the lines, Liz, for the audience.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I think we have a little announcement, and then we'll give that phone number to people. Okay.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We're currently in the period of Aries. By leaving a cycle based upon completion, the energy of Aries sparks initiation, creating action to separate into a new cycle of life. It's a fire sign, which means it will involve great emotion. And because separation may create resistance, it also takes great courage to break away to new ways of becoming.
Wherever you go, Alternative Talk 1150 is here for you.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, that phone number, everybody, is 888-298-5669. And I'll repeat it in a moment, but this opens up for 15 minutes our wonderful audience. Today's subject of Aries, the first of the archetypes. Please call us at Talk Cosmos here at 1150 KKNW. That's 1150 KKNW, but the phone number is 888-298-5669, because your thoughts, experiences, your successes, struggles, how you initiate your Aryan breakthrough of separation, the causes, new directions, and failures, the why, and what led you building. It all builds our collective experience. So we'll mention that. It'll be 15 minutes, and we're really glad to have the collective thought. 888-298-5669.
And correction, that is
Oh,
one
my
eight eight
goodness, I
eight two
goofed
nine
up.
eight
It's
five
five
five six
five.
six.
Oh my gosh, no wonder nobody's calling. Okay, Sue, back to the beginning. So sorry about that. It still is 888-298. However, the last four repeat 55, 69. That's 5569. One last time, I'll repeat it. 888-298-5569. Okay, hi Liz.
Hi, Sue Rose. It's nice to be back.
Yes, it is. What about you? While we're waiting for some people to call, tell me about your own Aryan adventures. I know that you left to return to Puerto Rico for where you'd lived for many years, then you returned back here, both a quest leaving and a quest coming back. Do you have some thoughts that of
Sure.
why?
Sure. Well, to go there, it's like, returning to a place that felt familiar, and it took courage to go. And then, as many of you know, 2017 was quite an adventurous hurricane season, to say the least. So, it was very much survival mode, that's for sure. And then to be able to return back to the Northwest with the help of many friends and family. So that was greatly, greatly appreciated. But it takes a lot of courage and energy and just the survival and helping each other. It was a lot about helping each other through tough times. And so,
That's really a great point because Aries is the individual, yet, and of course it goes on its own quest, but it is the cause, and it is that battle that people bind together as allies, to help support a cause or a purpose. Certainly, survival is one, but of late there have been across the globe so many energetic concerns of people wanting their freedoms and needing and the battles. And here, though, the whole point you bring up is finding those allies to interact and support on the total new experience. When you went down there, how did that work? Because that was several years ago, and you had a support system.
yes. And my son lives there, and, the warm weather, you could kind of say a Mars warm weather because it's warm and dry. So it's kind of like a Mars energy, Aries energy of weather. And I had a couple of jobs there and did my online work that I do with clients. But then when there's no electricity and no water and
Yeah.
everything closes down, you have to start all over and survive each day. So,
Well, that really would be the physical thwarting, such as any experience really can include, because it is uncharted. It's here nature came in and forced its way, but with every experience.
well, in,
To remind, go
in the
ahead.
whole year of 2017 was pretty interesting nationwide because we had the element of water, of floods, then hurricanes, you could say, was kind of a combination of a water and an air energy because it's blowing.
Yes.
And then the great fires we had in California. And so it's like kind of the elements were at work basically nationwide.
Absolutely. Yes, they were. That's so true. We've all been working on where's the new beginning, because sometimes the past is just finished. There isn't there it and astrologically, the 12th house, looking at it from this relationship, is where it is the totality, the energy of the cosmos that we have really no control over. You know, the stars, how they orbit, and how the tigers work with the lions. So,
Yes, that's true. And you might want to say that you're talking about the houses, and perhaps there's someone out there that doesn't know what the astrological houses are, but you take a circle and divide it into 12 equal parts, and you come up with the 12 houses. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about houses, for those that might not know.
yes. And there's many thoughts of why and how. Certainly, parts of that relate to the equinoxes and the solstices, which is related to light, because the equinoxes have equal light, which spring is and fall is. And spring, and depending if you're on the upper hemisphere or the lower hemisphere, which I think collectively astrologers are really focusing on the fact that we're not just up here in the north. We do have a whole globe that's below the equator. But good point. I appreciate you identifying some of these terms.
Well,
And
it'll
I've
just
been,
help the audience a little bit, because maybe there's somebody that doesn't know. So,
yes, yeah, there is that continuation of cycles. Do you have thoughts about, well, looking back at astrology's mythology, you know, it's interesting that in Greece, Edith Hamilton, who writes in the 50s, was a wonderful author that wrote about mythology, the Greek way, the Roman way, and mythology, just as a book title, brought up the fact that, or the idea that the Greeks were the first to disassociate themselves from animals in their mythology, that their gods looked like themselves as people. And, you know, if you look at consciousness as an evolutionary step, which I follow the evolutionary idea that we have soul growth, gives up the intentional relationship to everything. Um, it's a good way of looking at how the Greeks, and because all of these relate further back, but we have brought forward a lot the language of the Greeks and the Romans, because the Romans took the mythology right from the Greeks. Much of it, not all of it, but much of it. But in Greek mythology, and remembering this idea that people were disassociating themselves from the wildness, they were trying to civilize and bring themselves to this other dimension of their thought patterns and communication. That, and Mars was called Eris, at that Ares, was not particularly cared for. And in their thought that even his parents, which happened to be Jupiter, the great god of everything, the sky, and Hera, who ended up being Juno later on, really didn't like him. And it was because of, I think, what it took to get to that point. And there are points in our life when we need to break away so much that there is intensity, there is fighting and battles, and it hurts. People are pained from it. It's not an experience that people can settle with later. It needs to be recognized. So obviously those experiences are not liked. And so therefore what represented that was looked upon as, not wanted. And it wasn't until Rome, where civilization had worked along in time, they're both related, of course, during that time, but the Empire of Rome, where they had conquests and they brought in a civilized idea of what conquest was. You know, they could have a role within society and be these generals and be these people that go out. And so there they the society has Mars as their patron, of so many circumstances, giving them strength for the battle, which is another aspect of how we build our allies, I guess. Yes?
Yes, and then you talked about the evolution of society and souls and everything. Well, the evolution of astrology, Mars used to be considered just war and anger and aggression. And, now we can kind of broaden that. And, we have Mars or Aries energy as blazing a trail and having courage to move forward and passion. So it's evolving there too.
Yes, yes. And it must have a lot to do with tools, because what you have is what you work for, and what you have in consciousness, of course, is what you can do. And it is instinctive. It's just that fire that goes right forth. And it is just going to eat up that energy as it goes. And it needs to act as it can. Otherwise, it's a bottled up explosion. It needs somewhere to go. And I remember some of the mythology, thank you, that Mars was put in a brass. Brass was big. They were forging, a lot of forging back then with fire and tools, and was like in a little what am I trying to say? Like enclosed in this brass, like a cell, not a cell, but like a crib or something. I mean, right off from the get-go. So when you think about it, it also is that aggression could be contained, but you also need a barrier around yourself in order to protect your inner self from some of the harshness that it takes in order to break through. I think as a people, that's something to recognize. We have our warriors, and even in our everyday life, all of us have that harshness of if we ignore it, then how do we deal with it? But it's a tool eventually, just like it can get fashioned.
Yes, absolutely. And, starting in a pure form of Aries and Mars in the first house, it's a lot about self. So your infantile self of when you start to separate from mother and say mine, and, you can take it down there even too, to how when there's that separation and that you become, this is important for me and I want to do this.
Right. Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding. That's beautiful. It is a real growth right from the very first little start coming up out of the seed. And for that reason, some things really don't last. They don't have enough fire in them, I guess. They just don't really. Everything has a purpose of its timing and lends itself to something else. Embracing that is what, as far as us with our self-development, we continue on. But I mean, the fact is, depending on what we're looking at, projects or things that particular phase of it didn't work, so you change the energy. That's another thing. Energy doesn't destroy, it gets recycled.
Yes,
So.
and perhaps that isn't your cup of tea and you move on to something else, but maybe it was like, well, I liked it, but now I have to perfect it.
Yeah, which gets more allies or else more conquest. Way, yes, quite a journey. Well, if there is anybody out there, we could take a call. We're going to run our last portion of the show. This is Talk Cosmos. Thank you for joining us. Still on 1150 AM radio, and it's 1150 KKNW. We're not quite leaving yet, but there is going to be a little station identification, and we'll be back.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick and proud aunt. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing. But not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. 1 in 6. That little girl sitting alone at the playground, she can't play like the other kids. She doesn't have the energy because she's hungry. School lunch will be her only meal today. It breaks my heart that this is the reality in our country, but it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste. This food is then provided to families and children in need. Being a kid should be about using your imagination, learning, and having fun. These children shouldn't have to miss out on simply being a kid because they're hungry. To find out how you can help end childhood hunger in your community, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Conversation you won't find on the rest of the dial. Alternative Talk 1150.
Okay. Hello?
Hi, Sue Rose.
Oh, hi, Liz. Liz Muschett, our wonderful guest, initiating this wonderful venture. And Liz Muschett, you spell that M like Mary, U, Schett. That's her name at her website. And again, people can go to our wonderful website, Talk Cosmos, and see the schedule. And next week, in fact, we're having John Luke. John is a board member of the local chapter. It's not a chapter, it's its own organization, Washington State Astrology Association. Meets once a month. And he'll be talking again about Aries because the sun is still, we are still in that orbital cycle. And however, he'll be touching on Chiron, a dwarf planet that has a 51-year cycle and goes through a sign every 4.5 years or such, and is changing into the next sign of Aries. So we'll speak of that among other things. But that's next week, so do check. And if you're in the area, turn on 1150. But again, if you're streaming, and to check the archives, we have archives, it's at 1150kknw.com. Or else our Talk Cosmos has a link, past episodes, and boink, you're right there. Just like Aries energy. Fire. Hi, Liz. We'll continue going. We have a few minutes here, and we can try to recap a little bit or come across with something new about what new ideas do you have? What's on your agenda for striking out that's going to be taking the courage of life again?
Well, Aries is about initiation and moving forward. It's kind of like when we're birthed. It's like when we take our first breath, we have to kind of work to take our first breath. So,
right.
We have to work at it a little bit. So, some new projects. Well, I'm going to be doing some little mini retreats for small groups, continuing doing my consultations, and, kind of looking for new venues and things to pursue myself, actually. So, but that's still kind of in the works for me, where you blazed your new trail already, so.
Well, it's a process. It's so true. It started. It's true. There are so many facets of experience, because just really creating that channel to produce is a lot. But then there's more involved. It's continuing. I mean, we're getting speakers, and so it's not a finished product by any manner. And if it were, perhaps it would be boring. I mean, it may not be boring, but is it life? As I think that's the whole idea, is this new energy is breaking away from a cycle of completion, some cycle, because we're many facets to people. And it's that excitement the desire, the thrill to forge, to see what else is happening and where we're connected, to try new parts of ourselves. So it's all really
Yeah, we're
connected.
a work in process.
Yes, that's so true. And the shadows. I see that, and it's true. We just, by standing, unless it's at noon, we bring shadows. And it is that thing of going through and trying to dig down. And I don't know if Aries really contemplates that so much, as it just seems like the fire went out. There's something stopping it, and so it wants to go around the corner. It needs to keep burning. It wants to keep burning.
Oh, it keeps going all the time. I don't think it ever completely goes out, but sometimes it slows down. It can take a little break or get a little stuck, but then it gets unstuck. So it has that movement forward always. And like if you have your own Mars or Aries energy prominent for yourself, you're most likely to take more chances. And, if a friend called you perhaps and said, hey, let's go bungee jump, if you have Mars and a fire sign, you perhaps say, oh, that sounds like great fun. But someone that has it in another element could say, well, no, I want information about that, or absolutely not, I will not do that, or...
Yes, that's right. What appeals, the risk, the whole idea of how it connects. There are many subtleties. But that energy really drives the chart. That was my takeaway from my teacher that I think of, who really instructs my way of thinking, Maurice Fernandez. And he really presented that energy. So it's very important to really consider. There's many energies in us, but this Mars factor, the Aryan point, the very beginning, that seed, the quest of figuring out, the courage to actually stop figuring and just doing. And I think that's really the Aryan thing. Once you're doing, then you have some reference to go from. Just like here on Earth, we have a reference out there. If we were just hanging in space, it would be like, well, why is that happening or this happening? There's no cycles to see. But we have this reference point. And it's the same thing with the cycles. It's the same way of trying to observe and figure out. So our start, regardless, like they say, just do the universe.
Yes.
Douglas.
And you might not know what the outcome is. You might think you know, but it's likely to change.
Yes. Oh boy, is that right? That is like a double-edged sword, which actually reminds me totally of Aries, because sword, cutting, stopping, separation is so much of it. And we yes.
So it'll be interesting to see where your radio show leads you. Because, yes, you started it, and now who knows where it'll lead a year or 2 or 3 years down the road.
Yes. And thank you very much for that. And we'll wrap this up as a thought. And that is because the sword, that's right. Sometimes you get cut by the sword and you're just there bleeding to death. It's like, oh my God. So, excuse me. But the real situation is when you pick yourself back up and you realize, oh, okay, so this wasn't the way I thought about it. But what pieces do I have? What energy? Because that energy keeps recycling and coming back. And it's how we make, well, as the old proverb says, the new one, make lemonade out of lemons. Even Beyonce, I've been told, says that. Something I heard many years ago. So it will be exciting. Ideas flourish and the energy that comes into it. So people that are listening, have courage. Come and speak next week when we have John Luke. And sharing. And if not this week, not next week, that's fine. But certainly your time shall come, as all of ours, and we'll welcome it. We'll be very happy to have your input, because together, that's how archetypes were built. It was a collective, unconscious energy, just out of necessity. And trying to look at this, and it continues to build. All right. Well, thank you once more, Liz. I think we're about leaving. It's been a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to the next one and having you return at another date. I think we talked about perhaps June 23rd, so that I'm going to keep that on my calendar.
Well, thank you, Sue Rose. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Okay. Blessings.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, this show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.